Alright guys, back again with another video for you guys today. Please forgive if you see my mouse in the background. It's a lot of information, but here we go. With both reviews done, it's now time to shoot the comparison video. So here we go. Today, I'm going to be comparing the Nexus 5X and the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm trying to help you guys decide which one of these two devices is the best for you. So I'm going to try and be as objective and clear as possible. So I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. So starting off, first thing I want to talk about on each device is the build quality. Now, start with the Nexus 5X. Build quality wise, the Nexus 5X is built quite good. There's no creaking, there's no rattling of any kind, and the feel in the hand is pretty good. So, build quality on this is quite good indeed. Next, moving over to the Moto X Pure Edition, the build quality on this as well is quite good. The feel in the hand is great. No creaking, very well built, no rattling, and textured power buttons. Everything is built quite well. Alright. Moving on now, let's talk about the displays on these devices. Let's start over here this time. In terms of the Moto X Pure Edition, we have a 5.7 inch, I think it's IPS LCD 3 display with a quad-core resolution that's 2460 by 1440. So you have a quad HD display on this guy, and I must say, in terms of display, this is a beautiful display. Very well built, the colors are very good, and at max brightness, even at medium brightness or low brightness, the stuff just seems to pop off the screen here. So, of course, free ad means you get the obligatory, free app means you get the obligatory ad. So, as you can see right here, let me let this focus, it has a pixel density of 520. And as I said earlier, it has a quad HD display at 1440 by, it's 2560, I said 2460, 2560. And a 5.7 inch display. Now, moving on, let's talk about the display on the Nexus 5X here. So, when it comes to the Nexus 5X, we also have an IPS LCD display, but we have a smaller display, and we have a 1080p display. So we have a smaller 5.2 inch 1080p display clocked at with a pixel density of 423, and this is also a great display, and the colors seem to be very accurate. So when it comes to displays on either device, you should be happy with either one. They both get really bright in direct sunlight. Let me just show you real quick. So at max brightness, and over here at max brightness. So outside in direct sunlight, you're not going to have an issue with either one of these displays. They both get really bright, no problems. They are both very good and very accurate, and the colors are almost spot on. So either display on either device is really good. And as you can see, they both get really low here. So at nighttime when you're indoors, you shouldn't have any issues with the brightness on the display. Let me just crank these back up. Make it seeable here. So that's the displays. Now, moving along, let's talk about the hardware and the software on both of these devices. Let's start with the Nexus 5X this time. So, hardware-wise, in the Nexus 5X here, we're running a Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 processor with 2 gigs of RAM and 16 gigs of internal storage. As you can see right there. Of which you only actually have access to about 1.8 gigs of RAM and about 11 gigs of storage. Now, there's no micro SD expansion on this guy, so the storage you get is the storage you get. Software-wise, we're running Android 6.0.1, which is the latest version of Marshmallow. And it's a fairly stock experience with all of the Android features that you're used to, with the exception of they added a fingerprint menu. So you can set up a fingerprint, because this does have a built-in fingerprint scanner, which they call Nexus Imprint. Other hardware features, hardware and software features, is hardware-wise, you have a 5 megapixel camera on the front, and you have one front-facing speaker on this guy. On the bottom, you have an LED notification light, which is white and blue. Those are the only 2 colors that I have seen in my testing. Then up at the top, you have a light sensor and your receiver. On the back, you have a 12.3 megapixel camera with LED flash and laser autofocus, and I already talked about your fingerprint scanner. Okay. Now let's move over here. So the software in this guy is the hardware and software in this guy for the Moto X Pure Edition is you're running a 3 gigs of RAM, also a Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 processor, and you also have 16 gigs of storage. Out of the box though, and after you set up things, you have about 9 gigs, as you can see there. And in terms of memory, you actually only get about 2,500 megabytes, because the system has to take a little bit. But key feature here is that unlike the Nexus 5X, you do get micro SD card expansion, expandable up to 128 gigs, but I'm sure you could fit a 200 gig SD card in here. You shouldn't have any issues. Now, some other hardware things is you have dual front firing speakers here, and you have your sensors, so you have your motor display. Also up front, you have a 5 megapixel camera, also with LED flash. On the back, you have a 21 megapixel camera with LED flash as well. Alright? Software wise, we're almost running the latest version of Android. We're only slightly off. We're running Android 6.0. And as you can see, it's a very stock experience here. So, the only difference being that the Moto X Pure Edition does not have a fingerprint scanner, so you don't have that menu. Other than that, it's a very stock experience. Now, let's move on. Let's talk about some differentiating features on these two devices before we move to the next thing. So now, there's a slightly different software set in here, which is basically Motorola's set of apps. Let me make sure I get it right here. So you come in here and you have Motorola's app suite. So you have custom actions, like you could do twist to capture. You could chop to open the flashlight. You have the Motorola display, and you have the Motorola commands, so you can issue commands using a custom phrase. So that's that. Other than that, you really have a stock Google experience. Now let's move over to the Nexus 5X here. Now, this is stock Android as Google intended it to be. So you have all of your stock Android features with the addition of the fingerprint scanner or the Nexus imprint for added security. That's pretty much it. You can still do similar voice commands similar to the Moto X using the Google Now, so you can do that. And whereas the Moto X has the Moto display, Google has something similar called adaptive display, where you can not adaptive display, ambient display, where you can get notifications while the screen is off. So it'll be something similar to this. So when I wave my hand here, let me see. Yeah, when I wave my hand, you get your notifications at a glance. Alright? Now, the way Google does this, let me turn it on real fast because I had it turned off. Since I have the LED, I don't really need that on. The way Google does this is ambient display. And in order for this to work, you actually have to provide motion. So let me see if, my finger touched the fingerprint scanner. Let me see, guys. So you have your ambient display there. And then when you touch it, the display lights up. So, similar features. The thing that differentiates, though, is that you actually have to use motion in order for this to detect. So there's been times where I've tried to do this, like the Moto X, and just wave my hand across, don't work out. Whereas the Moto X, all it has to do is sense your hand, and it's going to come on. But similar features nonetheless. So that's it for differentiating features. And yeah. So now, moving along, let's talk about the glitches, stutters, and crashes in these two guys here. And happily, I'm happy to report that other than slowdowns under heavy usage, there's no real glitches, stutters, and crashes in this guy. So, and the same can be said over here on the Nexus 5X. Other than slowdowns under heavy usage, there's no real glitches, stutters, or crashes in this guy as well. So, that's that. Now, moving along, let's talk about the Wi-Fi in both of these. Now, over here, well, it's pretty much the same loadout. So, the Wi-Fi package in both of these is Wi-Fi 802.11, BGNN, and AC dual band. So, what does that mean? You take advantage of the absolute best Wi-Fi modules in both of these guys. So Wi-Fi speeds are pretty much as good as they can be. And as I said in my reviews, for both of these guys, I have a pretty decent router. So as you can see, let's start here. We get pretty good speeds on the Moto X Pure Edition, as you can see. Also, I think I swiped it away. we get pretty good speeds on the Nexus 5X, as you can see. So Wi-Fi on both of these is pretty good. Now, so a differentiating factor in the Wi-Fi is that sometimes you have to refresh the Moto X's Wi-Fi. Sometimes it will be playing and then just get quite skippy, and you have to like refresh the page or disconnect and reconnect the Wi-Fi. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, so I had to mention it. Whereas the Wi-Fi in the Nexus 5X didn't have any of those issues whatsoever. Sorry guys, I was watching some comic story videos earlier. Let's just get to some of my videos, make this nice and easy. Alright, so yeah. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to give you a sample, a live sample of the Wi-Fi performance. Wow, I can't talk here apparently. So let me go ahead and find a video. I think I'm going to do this one for that, and I'm going to do this one over here. So start here. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these speakers, I'm going to start out, this way you can get an example of how the speakers sound. I'm going to start out with each speaker at 50%, and then I'm going to put it at max. This way you'll be able to hear how the speakers sound. Give me a second. Alright, that's about 50%. Alright, so it doesn't really matter, but if one does it, I might as well do it there. So now, both speakers are set at 50%, and we're going to start off, let's start off with the Moto X here. So, backing in with another video for you guys. And now, I'm doing this one kind of quick, and I'll explain more in detail as we go along. But today, we're doing my full review of the pure Nexus ROM for the LG Google Nexus 4. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into this. So, starting off, I just want to talk about the main features. Okay, so you heard the Moto X at 50% volume. Now, let's bring in the Nexus 5X, which is also set to 50% volume. Here you go. Okay, so that was the Nexus 5X at 50%. Now what we're going to do is we're going to max both of them out so you can hear what they sound like at max volume. Yep, there we go. And let's start with the Nexus 5X. On my blue energy over there that's off camera is what you need to do is you charge it up all the way as full as you can, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna do a wipe data factory reset, and that's gonna. All right, so that's that. Now let's move over to the Moto X Pure Edition that this ROM supports. Now this is a purely, well, almost pure version of Android, and it's based on Android 6.0.1. Alright, Now we're just going to scrub through the video so you can see how it loads. Let me just look. And I don't really know too much about that, so alright, that's that. Now we're going to come back to the 5X. Wipe out everything. And then you want to go back in, scrub through. Then my Moto X PE Edition here that I'm shooting this video with. So yes, I don't know if I said it, but this video was shot with the Moto X PE. Alright, so as you guys have seen there, the Wi-Fi on both of these devices is quite good. So you're not going to have any problems with the Wi-Fi except for over here on the Moto X PE Edition. Sometimes you do have to refresh it. It does get a little stuttery sometimes. So that's that. Now let's move on and let's talk about the bands in these guys. So tell you what, we're going to start off with the Nexus 5X this time. And pretty much all I'm going to cover is the LTE bands. If you want to hear the other bands, please check out my full reviews on either one of these devices. I have the links in the video description along with all of the other links. So, but basically what I'm going to cover in this comparison video is just the LTE bands. So starting off, we're going to cover the LTE bands for the 5X here. So here we go. Starting off here, we have band 1, 2100, band 2, 1900, band 3, 1800, band 4, 1700 and 2100, band 5, 850, band 7, 2600, band 12, 700, band 13, 700, band 17, 700, band 20, 800, band 25, 1900, band 26, 850, band 29, 700. And those were for the US models. Now, the differentiating pieces are for the Asian models, you get more bands. For the UK models, you get more bands. So take all those bands and add these bands to it. So for the Asian models, you get the addition of band 38 and band 40 and band 41. So band 38, 2600, band 40, 2300, and band 41, 2500. And then for the UK, you get all of that, and yeah, it's pretty much the same. So you get those, you get the addition of band 38, band 41, and band 40 for the UK and the Asian models. So that's that for the 5X. Now let's go ahead and talk about the bands for the Moto X PE Edition. Excuse me, guys. I don't know if you heard that on camera. So jumping right into it, you get band 1, 2100, band 2, 1900, band 3, 1800, band 4, 1700 and 2100, band 5, 850, band 7, 2600, band 8, 900, band 12, 700, band 13, 700, band 17, 700, band 25, 1900, band 26, 850, band 41, 2500. Alright? And with the differentiating factors is that this doesn't have the Korean bands, but if you're in the UK, you do get band 40, which is 2300, and you get band 28, which is 700. So with this guy, you lose out on band 38, and you lose out on the other one. What did I say? 38. Yeah, you just lose out on band 38 with this guy. And it doesn't have the Korean ones, but it should still work. But pretty much All that means is that if you pick up either one of these devices, no matter where you go in the world, as long as you pick up a SIM from a carrier that supports any one of those LTE bands, both of these devices should work no problem. If you're in the States or anywhere and you have a specific carrier, all you really need to do is make sure that your carrier supports those bands that I mentioned, and it should work no problem. Or your carrier supports specific bands, so it works no problem. That's all that means. So I put that in there because that's very important, because I do get some questions about bands sometimes and what carriers are supported. That's why I include this band section in all of my videos, so you know. So, moving on now, let's talk about the Bluetooth in these guys. So, let's start with the Moto X PE edition here. Bluetooth wise, we have Bluetooth version 4.1, and as I say, the Bluetooth works, but there is a slight issue sometimes when you have multiple Bluetooth devices connected. It does struggle to connect. So other than that, Bluetooth works no problem. So let me go ahead and we can fire up this Bluetooth here. Did I click it? Yeah, there we go. And as you can see, I've actually tried to connect this up and paired it up to a lot. So Bluetooth works with no issues. Alright. Let me go ahead and, whoops, didn't mean to click that. Alright, let's go ahead and turn that back off. Alright. Now, let's talk about the Nexus 5X here. So, Bluetooth wise on this guy, it's running Bluetooth version 4.2, and the Bluetooth works in here without any issues whatsoever. So let me go in here. Now, I didn't connect this one up to as many devices, but I did connect it up to my Moto X PE edition, and I did connect it up to some of my headphones, and it worked without issues. So Bluetooth on either one of these guys, you shouldn't have a problem with, unless, just be mindful, if you're pairing up a lot, you might have a connectivity issue with this guy. So if you're going to pair up a lot of devices, make sure you turn the other one off before you try to connect it to the next one. If not, you're going to have an issue there. Just wanted to point that out. Now, moving on, let's talk about the GPSs in these guys. And let's go ahead and start with the Nexus 5X here. So, GPS wise, the GPS in here is pretty good. Now this is within seconds. It locked on, it got a 3D position fix, accurate up to 13 feet within seconds. So the GPS in here is pretty good. And turn-by-turn navigation with this device was pretty much perfect. Didn't have any issues with navigation, rerouting, anything like that. So the GPS in there is pretty good. Now, the same can be said for the Moto X PE edition here. Just go ahead and get it. Which also locked on and had a 3D fix within seconds. And this one was accurate up to 10 feet. And the camera's not doing it justice, but as you can see, the higher bars are actually green. They're coming out tan on the video, but they're actually green. Whereas you got a lot of medium bars here. But GPS on this guy was pretty much the same. Didn't have any issues. Locking on the reception and using turn-by-turn, didn't have any issues with this guy. So, regardless of which device you pick up, in terms of GPS, these two, either one of these devices will not let you down. Now, moving on, let's talk about the call quality in this guy and the speaker call quality. Let's start off with the Moto X this time. So now, I use both of these devices on T-Mobile. T-Mobile is my main carrier, and call quality wise, didn't have any issues. All the calls were crisp and clear, especially with this device. The calls were very loud. Now, taking that to the other hand, speakerphone calls were also very crisp and clear and got quite loud as well. So no issues with call quality on this Moto X PE edition whatsoever. It was actually a joy to use this device to make and receive phone calls. And I got no complaints about how I sounded. I always sounded crisp, clear, and loud. So that was good. And the same can be said of the Nexus 5X here. Same thing. Calls were nice and crisp and clear through the receiver here. They got quite loud. Didn't have any issues. Same thing for the speaker as well. It was very clear. Didn't have any problems there. So that's that. So once again, regardless of whichever or either one of these devices you pick up, you shouldn't have a problem when it comes to call quality or speakers. That being said, you have to crank this Nexus 5X speaker. When you're watching media, you have to crank it to 25% or higher. Below that, you're not going to hear much. So you really got to crank it. Whereas this one works pretty good. You don't have to crank it all the way. So just had to point that out. So, moving on. Let's get into talking about the cameras on this guy. On these guys. So, let's start over here. And now, the video samples will be in the video sample playlist. All I'm going to do here is go over the interfaces of each device, and then we're going to take a look at some photo samples, and we're going to move on. So, interface-wise, comes to the Nexus 5X here, it's pretty straightforward. It's very clean. Out of the box, you have auto flash turned on and HDR auto turned on, and you do get slow motion video at 20 frames per second. And right here, to switch between photo and video modes, you just have to swipe. So now I'm in video mode. Go back. Now I'm in photo mode. To switch between the front and rear facing cameras, you push this button. Hey, how you guys doing? Alright. And then we're going to switch back. And then to access your settings and your other features, going to hit this hamburger menu up here. And as you can see, you have photo spare, panorama, lens blur, and settings. So now if we go into settings, you can see, and we go to resolution. In order to take, you can see, to get full advantage of the 12.2 megapixels, you have to shoot in 4:3. I don't like